All right, Dr. Wright, let's just jump right into some topics that I know a lot of our families and students, would like to, as they continue to digest things. And first off, let's get to the matter of graduation. We've finally got some plans in place, and it took a while to get there, but it was all in the name of safeguards, all those sorts of things, just to make sure they got ironed out. And now we feel like we got a great plan for all our schools moving forward.
Yeah, and I guess, Bart, it's one of those things that no one really understands as far as what happens behind the scenes and the restraints that we were also having to more or less take into consideration. There was never the intention of not being able to have a graduation, but the thing that we also had to be very mindful and sensitive to as far as whether it was the governor's orders or any of the guidelines that were coming out, particularly around social distancing and trying to limit to small groups, which anyone that has any history with graduations of any kind, that you're not talking about small groups, and you're talking about very big but very important celebrations. And so we really it appeared, let me put it that, it appeared that we didn't know what we were doing as we kept making adjustments, but it was simply because we were having to make pivot and turn quickly as new guidelines were coming out. And so, we originally had it in June, and then we moved it to July,
Yes.
and then we moved it back to June again. And so we're going to still be very sensitive as far as, again, we have social distancing guidelines in place. We have to be mindful as far as with any celebration, just the number of people. So we're doing sort of split sessions, except for Watertown High School because of their numbers. But nevertheless, we're going to have graduation. It might not be quite like the traditional pomp and circumstance that we've had at Murphy Center in years past, but I will say this is something that 20 years from now, our graduates will look back and have stories to tell about what happened in 2020 that will add to not only their story, but as far as the accommodations and how we had to figure out how to get around it. And
they'll be able to share that not only with their friends that in this district. I mean, no matter where they go in the country, if you were a 2020 graduate, you will have a common bond to share, like, hey, how did you guys do it? Here's what we had to do, those sorts of things. So we also want to remind our families, too, that tickets are limited for that, four per graduate. And as we are in that time of year, Dr. Wright, pop-up thunderstorms can happen and those sorts of things. If those ceremonies are moved to the gyms, then those tickets go down to 2. So we ask for our families to work with us in that as well, because in the state that we're in, certain guidelines will have to put in place if inclement weather forces things indoors.
And we say that to please be patient with us, because again, we wish we could go back to the way we had our graduations, but it's simply not possible. I know there's concern about the one parking pass. Well, the thing is, we do not have the big parking lots that you have at Murphy Center at MTSU. We're talking about parking space at high schools that's been limited to juniors and seniors that drive. And so when you look at a graduating class of 450, and let's say that there are 4 in attendance, I mean, all you have to do is the math and know that we can't accommodate that many cars. And so I know that there's been some really hurt feelings, but it might be something that, either drop a car off, drive in. I mean, be creative. But the thing is, we can't accommodate multiple cars from each family. It's just not doable.
And as we go on, we'll get information on schools that plan to live stream and those sorts of things. So more information on that will be coming as we get closer to the ceremony dates. I know a school or two has had those plans, but as far as all 4 schools, that is still being developed, and we'll finalize things and to see which ones will be live streaming and those sorts of things. So we'll pass that information along. Okay, let's get into a topic that I know is a hot topic right now. Now that we are in that standard calendar, part of the year where it is the summer months, as we plan and prepare for whatever the 2020-2021 school year looks like, I can tell you those conversations have started long ago. We've had lots of meetings here recently. What can you share with our families on where we are in determining what that might look like?
Well, and Bart, that's one of those questions that, again, I have to make sure that people understand. I've shared this so many times that this is not something that's unique to Wilson County, the state of Tennessee. These conversations are taking place with every public school district across the country. They just are, because we don't know what we might be facing in the fall. And the school world that we've all been comfortable with for well over 100 years changed abruptly this last spring. And so what we are in the midst of, and in looking and planning in anticipation of what we might be facing this fall, is looking at maybe 3 to 4 options, simply because what we would hope for, that we could go back to a traditional school calendar, a traditional instructional day, and we plan accordingly. That's what we do during the summertime. We start looking at our numbers, we start looking at placement, we start looking at how we are going to configure at every individual school. That's what we would hope for. But we know now, simply because there's not been any allowances or really any indication that we are going to remove those social distancing guidelines. And that's a real concern when you look at schools and then the makeup of schools. For example, an average classroom is anywhere from 750 to 800 square feet. And if we're looking at social distancing of keeping students 6 feet apart, we have problems.
Right.
And so that's part of that conversation as far as what other options would we look at. Same thing as far as guidelines on busing. Every other row, 1 student per seat. Well, that's not doable. It's simply not doable. We're struggling as every other school district trying to find bus drivers, let alone trying to limit bus seats. So there's a lot of issues that we have to look at as far as that. We would certainly like that traditional school year. Another option, looking at that hybrid blended approach. Do we have to go every other day and split the population? What would that plan look like? So there's a lot of discussion looking at that. The third one being, if we have to go to a virtual platform, as far as there is no attendance in a brick and mortar building, that everything is presented in a remote environment, which is not something that we would want to see long term, but nevertheless, that might be something we have to consider. Is it something that we need to look at it every other day by trying to divide our attendance up that way? But the thing that drives all this, as we're having not only the planning and the deep conversations, Bart, we have to be sensitive to the implications for the family unit. Yes. Because the thing that immediately that we are trying to work around, and it's difficult because, again, this conversation is taking place everywhere, the working family. And we're coming off a period that, many of them are trying to get back to work, try to go to work, and childcare, like it or not, is one of our obligations as a school system, that it's not only about the teaching and learning side of it, but to make sure that we care for our children as well, because parents, families depend on us for that, and we certainly understand. But the thing is that as we move into this new environment, I'll be the first to tell you that we weren't prepared, nor could we even anticipate what we were going to be facing. How can we be better prepared moving into the future? Right. One thing that we're looking at is making sure that we are going to be prepared as far as devices for students. But with that, we've got to make sure our teachers are trained and prepared, because even though it's easy enough to say that we use technology in the classroom, it's much different when it's with a remote learning, as far as the teachers in one place and then students that are in their homes or wherever they might be. And that takes special training, that takes special preparation, and how it would look and how we would provide it. So there's a lot of moving parts, pieces behind the scenes right now. And we gave our principals a taste of it yesterday, as far as this committee presented out, and giving them some preparation as far as what the design might look like. And it's disruptive. There's no other word. But the thing is that we are going to continue to be very sensitive to what we're doing. And when we feel confident as far as that there's not going to be big changes at the State Department, because, again, that's where a lot of our guidance is coming from, and also the governor's office. And even though there's that circulation of the latest CDC guidelines, they're guidelines and suggestions. That doesn't mean that that's what's going to be in place. And I know there's been quite a few parents that have reached out saying, how are you going to do this? Well, much of it we can't. We're still struggling trying to figure out how to keep a mask on a kindergartner's face and not on top of their head.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, again,
right.
We're talking about children, young children. And we also have to be sensitive that we don't want to minimize creating more trauma, because that's not what they're familiar with. That's not the classroom that they were familiar with because of what they left last spring and where they're going to be potentially in the fall. So a lot of behind the scenes. And the other question, Bart, that comes up, why are we not publicizing? Why are we not keeping the public informed? Anytime that we put something out, it's almost like that is what it's going to be. And so,
right.
Like graduation, for example, we had to go back and forth simply because guidelines were changing and we were having to adapt and make sure that we were within those guidelines. And it's the same thing. The summer is always about planning for the next school year. So that's not anything new. But once we feel pretty confident as far as the options and looking at, and it's not a contingency plan, these are options that we will be looking at should we have to move into it. First and foremost, we're hoping that we'll start school just like we would normally, on this case, August the 6th.
Yeah.
And move forward. But if something happens with a second wave, let's say in October, whatever, what do we fall back on? We have a plan. If we are still under social distancing norms coming into August, we have options that we have vetted out and make sure that we will communicate to parents as far as what that will look like. So all these pieces, I don't want anyone to be under the impression that we're going to wait till the last minute. That's not the case at all. There is a lot of work going on, and that's the assurance I want to give to parents. But first and foremost, we always think through the lens of a parent, what is this going to do that will cause disruption, cause as far as more harm than good, and we're being very sensitive to that. And people that are working on the committee are parents too, so those lenses become very, very important.
And lastly, as we kind of wind things up here, timeline for parents and families is they plan in their own homes, in their work life and everything. I mean, this touches our livelihood, this pandemic, in every way possible. So as we move towards press on through the summer, are there certain milestone dates or some mile markers, I should say, that when it comes to that point that you would like to have something that you can release to the public to say, here's where we're gearing towards as we get closer to August? And I know that August is a few months, as we quickly approach June this weekend, August would be a few months away. But timeline, is there anything you can share involving that on potential plans?
What I would hope for, and again, this is an internal measure, that I would like to be able to give a framework by the 1st of July.
Yes.
That and a framework being exactly that it's subject to change, but this is our thinking. This is what people can anticipate. If this is not viable, this is what we're going to, and this is what the expectation would be. We don't want to surprise anyone. We don't want anyone not to have time to plan accordingly. But again, being very sensitive to that. But what I would also say that I urge parents to please pay attention to what comes out of the State Department. Many times it's like, why are we doing this? Why particularly with graduation, with no idea that we don't have that autonomy, particularly when we are under restrictions as far as large numbers, gatherings. I mean, even our sports for this year have been impacted dramatically. So I'm asking people to really pay attention to what's happening, not only at the state level, but also at the national level, because that impacts much of what we're doing, and we plan accordingly. But the thing is, our students, our staff, and our parents are very, very important to us, and we're not going to do anything that we see that would put them at risk or contrary to as far as what are the best guidelines. But the thing that we also know is that parents want us to be back in school, but we want to be in school too.
Right.
We want to be in school too. We're missing our kids, and we need them right now, and they need us. And so that's our North Star. That's what, we plan around, and hope that all will be well.
And I guess one last topic, just real quickly, we can touch on, because we get a lot of questions on this. I know I have, because we have a lot of sports fans in Wilson County, and rightfully so.
Yeah.
It's a sports community,
Me
a
too.
band community. It's all about that. Fall sports, right now we are planning as if we would have normal seasons, but we don't know in terms of crowds and those sorts of things. There's a lot to still be determined there. Unsure exactly what TSSAA will do in terms of giving final directives and things like that. But as a district right now, I know our coaches and teams are preparing in a way that, hey, we hope to have sports, and nobody has said we're not having sports, but we just must carry on in a safe way to prepare for that. But so far, there hasn't been anybody to say, no, there's not going to be any football. There's not going to be. So that we want to squash that rumor right now, that's certainly not out there.
Absolutely. We don't want any indications, because again, and we've got safeguards, and our athletic director is in close proximity as far as what's coming out of TSSAA, but also looking and working with the health department as well, as far as what are those procedures and protocols that we need to follow to make sure that not only do we take care of our kids, but also as far as our coaching staff as well.
Yeah. So again, this is all a situation, as we all know, is subject to change. That has been the theme of 2020, and it should be no surprise to anyone who watches this. But the thing is, the preparation is in play for whatever comes.
Yes.
That we keep a firm vision on exemplary public education, whatever that looks like, and that's our goal at this district. And I know that you're working very tirelessly behind the scenes, making sure that whatever happens is going to be in the best interest of our students and families, for health, safety, and well-being for everyone. So,
and Bart, I want to just add, ask everyone, be patient with us. It might seem like, or appear that we're not doing anything, but trust me, I mean, we've got a lot of people working on this, looking at it, vetting what we are trying to propose and work through, but also trying to figure out what the limitations and barriers might be too. So please be patient with us. We're not going to step out there and put a program and what it's going to look like, knowing very well that it could change in 24 hours simply because of what we have to operate under.
As you say that, I've actually got to get back and continue working on an advanced communications plan that we are going to launch. So everybody's got a piece of this. So I'm going to get back to work on that. I'm going to let you get back to it. But certainly, as always, thank you for the time.
Okay. Thank you. Take care.